everyone, I'm Summer and this is my channel, Red Lipstick Book Addict, where we like to talk about mystery, romance, thrillers, and so much more. All opinions are welcome, of course, because here we like to talk about not only why we love to love books, but also why we love to hate them. And today we're going to be talking about A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. It's the first in the ACOTAR series. And this book is a fantasy book. It's got a little bit of romance. It's very action-packed at the end, and it's definitely got like adventure themes. So it's I would say the biggest genre in it is fantasy, but I'll go ahead and get into my spoiler-free review and just say that the romance element of it is very Beauty and the Beast-like, and there's even like a scene where well, I don't want to spoil it, I'll save that part for later, but it's definitely Beauty and the Beast, but then it reminds me of the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. If you haven't checked that out, you definitely should. It's like a dark fantasy fairy realm. There's the fairies and then there's the mortals, and like, you know, their relationship with each other is interesting because the fairies think they're better than the mortals because they have powers and the mortals don't. It's got that element in here because it's got the magical whimsiness to it. And it also reminded me of the Hunger Games, especially at the beginning, because Feyre is basically this young woman who goes out and hunts to feed her family. Her family started out rich, and then they basically went from riches to rags. They lost everything, and Feyre, being the baby sister, kind of took matters into her own hands and just saved everybody. She taught herself how to hunt, and she feeds the family, but they're still living in poverty. So it definitely gave me Katniss Everdeen vibes with that, which of course I loved because I absolutely loved the Hunger Games series. So if you like the Hunger Games, Beauty and the Beast, and the Cruel Prince series, if you like fairies, if you like kind of like dark romance where there's like kind of a little bit of a darkness to it, and fantasy, you're gonna like this book, definitely, for sure. Emphasis on fantasy. And I highly recommend it. The world building in this book is the best element out of anything. There's definitely compelling characters, and the plot development is very interesting, and there's a lot of different things going on, but you don't feel bogged down with the details. So, highly recommend. And that concludes my spoiler-free review. Now let's get into all of the spoilers, because that's the fun part, honestly. And then we're going to get into the storyline of the book. Okay, so first, quick synopsis of A Court of Thorns and Roses. It is, like I said, about Feyre, who goes to save her family. They went from riches to rags. Her mom is described as a cold socialite. She only cares about like shallow and frivolous things like the latest fashion, or, you know, like the parties, and she doesn't care about being a nurturing mother. So that was an interesting part to read about, and I am going to read you a quick line that it says about the mother. The mother actually, she died before she could see the demise of her family's wealth. So here, Feyre says, "Had she lived long enough to see our wealth crumble, she would have been shattered by it, more so than my father. Perhaps it was a merciful thing that she died. If anything, it left more food for us." And I kind of appreciated how bleak those lines were in the book, because it really painted a picture for me of just how truly bad things were for Feyre and her family. They're starving, they're living in poverty, and it's not like they're used to it, you know, to go from having everything to nothing. I mean, that's devastating. And then on top of that, her father was injured really terribly. So the reason that they faced the demise of their wealth is actually because of the father. He's a merchant, and he trades things like, you know, like silks and spices and things like that overseas. He you know, like goes on his ship and like delivers stuff. that was his job. Well, basically, he got in debt with the wrong people. They came after him, took everything, ransacked their place. And at this point, the mother's already died, long gone. She died of being sick or something. So it's just the three girls, Nesta, Elaine, and Feyre. Feyre being the youngest, and the father gets injured really badly and is unable to work. But he's not even there mentally or emotionally for the girls either. He kind of just checks out because of all the devastating blows, I guess, to his ego. Whatever. Like, you gotta be a dad, sir. But he doesn't. And it reminded me of Katniss Everdeen's mom in the Hunger Games. How she kind of just checks out mentally and emotionally after the father dies and they really go into poverty. So, but then what was interesting too is Nesta and Elaine. So, you know, they're the older sisters. You would think that they would be the ones to step it up, but they don't. And they kind of act spoiled still, like as if like they don't realize how poor they are, and they treat Feyre like she's less than because she is illiterate. She unfortunately was not able to learn how to read and write before they lost their wealth. And I guess she just isn't in school at all anymore because she's just out hunting for her family to feed them. But at that moment, whenever we're introduced to the sisters in that way, it reminded me of the spoiled stepsisters in Cinderella a little bit. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I did see some parallels with Cinderella at that point. So that was interesting. Nesta is kind of known as like the bad sister and Elaine is the good sister. So they both, you know, aren't the best sisters that they could be, but they are both still young and they're just kind of dealt some crappy cards and they let Feyre pick up the pieces. But Elaine is the kinder of the sisters. Nesta is kind of cruel. She's very, very cruel to Feyre and not appreciative of all of what Feyre does. Feyre at one point asked Nesta to go and chop up the wood or something for the fire, you know, like a very minimal chore compared to like everything that Feyre does for them. And Nesta like kind of bickers back and forth with her until she finally does it. But it's like, girl, you gotta pull your weight around here or something, you know. But she really doesn't. Feyre has to not only go out and hunt, but she has to delegate, you know, simple chores. And the dad basically just does nothing. You know, he's disabled, but he doesn't even try, which is very irritating. Well, then we get to a point in the story where it really picks up because Feyre is out in the woods hunting and she makes eye contact with this wolf and she's thinking, I can kill this wolf and feed my family for weeks, you know, we'll be good for weeks, I'll sell the pelt. She's like thinking of all this in her head, but there's something about this wolf that seems different to her. The wolf has this look in his eye like he's not just an animal, like he could be a part fae, you know, fairy. There's something kind of different about it. So, but she kills him anyway, and it gets pretty bleak. And I'm gonna just read that one little tiny part because I thought it was written really, really well. So the part where she finds, the wolf, it says, a rapid examination of the doe told me I could only carry only one animal, even though that would be a struggle. But it was a shame to leave the wolf. Though it wasted precious minutes during which any predator could smell the fresh blood, I skinned him and cleaned my arrows as best as I could. If anything, it warmed my hands. I wrapped the bloody side of his pelt around the doe's death wound before I hoisted her across my shoulders. It was several miles back to our cottage, and I didn't need a trail of blood leading every animal with fangs and claws straight to me. Grinning against the weight, I grasped the legs of the deer and spared a final glance at the steaming carcass of the wolf. Now this is the part where it gets kind of interesting. His remaining golden eye now stared at the snow-heavy sky, and for a moment I wished I had it in me to feel remorse for the dead thing. But this was the forest, and it was winter. So in that moment, we get just a glimmer of guilt for what she's done, because she just has a feeling about this wolf that is not just an animal. Also, I think Feyre doesn't really enjoy hunting. Like, for her, it's not like some sport. She's doing it to live. But she had a feeling it was fairy, didn't care, killed it anyway, and that comes back to bite her. So then we get to the point in the story where a beast comes into their home. So I'll come right here. So basically the beast barges into their little cottage and is like, who killed him? And she, you know, the family is terrified. It's a beast. He's got claws. He's ready to kill. And Feyre steps up and is like, I did it. I killed him. And she's very brave. And her family is just kind of cowering, you know. Like the cowards they are. No, I'm sorry. But like her family, like they just don't ever step up the way that Feyre does. So she tells the truth, and at first the beast is not sure that she really did it, and then he finally realizes that she did. So he says that she can either be slaughtered to ribbons or come live the rest of her days out in Prythian. So I'm going to show you a little map in the book here. Okay, so we have Prythian, which has all the courts, the summer court, winter court, spring court, you know, all the seasons, all that, night court, day court. And then we have the mortal lands where Feyre's village is. So Prythian is a part of the fairy realm. And the humans have been taught to fear the fairy realms because they've been taught that the fairies are evil, they're dishonest, they lie, or they find ways to lie. They can't lie, but they find ways to trick and curse people and all this stuff. So they're just very brainwashed by fear. I mean, we'll get into that because they have reasons for it, but they also don't. Like, they're not as bad as the humans think. So Feyre goes with the beast to Prythian, where she finds herself in a castle. And Tamlin is the beast. Tamlin is, he's a high lord. He's the high lord of the spring court. And he has his right-hand man, Lucien. Lucien is not thrilled about Feyre coming to, you know, dine on their delicious fairy foods and get to enjoy, you know, staying in this beautiful castle. He's like, why did you give mercy to her? She killed our friend. She skinned him and sold him and has no remorse, you know, and she has hatred in her heart for our kind. So Lucien is, you know, upset and grieving for his friend. And Tamlin he's definitely angry at Feyre, but he wants to keep her around and he can't bring it in him to kill her. He definitely could, but he doesn't want to. And he says that she's free to live wherever in Prythian, but it's kind of implied that he would rather her stay with them, I feel like. But he's definitely very cruel to her at first. Very cruel. Eventually, however, their relationship evolves, and it definitely feels like Beauty and the Beast, for sure. I mean, she's held captive at this castle, but it's also the best that she's ever lived. You know, she went from living in what Tamlin describes as a hovel, you know, it's like a shack, it's fallen apart, to now she's living in this beautiful castle. She has all the time in the world to do whatever she wants. She can paint if she wants to. You know, her one passion in life is to paint. And she never got to do that when she was trying to survive with her family. Now she has the time to paint. But she's like, my family's starving. Like, what about my family? So then he's like, all right. And he basically wipes their memory so they don't remember him, the beast, barging in to their home and threatening to kill them. And makes them think that Feyre is actually living with a sick aunt and taking care of her, who happens to be rich, and that's how they get all their riches. But really it's Tamlin that gives them all these riches. So Tamlin does keep his word. He does take care of her family, but they don't know where Feyre actually is. And Feyre is a little bit upset that they don't know the truth, but she accepts it. Because, I mean, what is she gonna do, really? She ends up falling in love with Tamlin, and Tamlin with her, and it seems like everything is happy and happily ever after, and, oh, you know, she doesn't get to see her family anymore, and that kind of sucks. but at least, you know, her family's taken care of and she's taken care of. So then what happens is we start to hear more about this thing called the Blight. And the Blight is kind of like this magical cursed pandemic where a lot of the courts have been cursed and they're stuck wearing a mask on their face and their powers have been weakened. Amarantha is behind this. Amarantha is like the villain in this story. She's desperate. She's thirsty. She really, really likes Tamlin, but he does not like her. And she wants power. She wants to be queen, but she wants to wield that power in a very cruel and sadistic way because she's evil. She also has hatred for humans and resentment because fairies constantly choose humans over her, and her sister was betrayed, and it's just this whole thing where she has like resentment towards the humans. Well, anyway, so Tamlin has this curse put on him by Amarantha, and what we find out is that the curse is the only way to break the curse is if Tamlin can find a human girl who will fall in love with him, but also she has to hate fairies. So it's kind of like a contradictory statement, because how is she supposed to fall in love with a fairy and hate them at the same time? And also she has to kill one of his men, one of his fairies, in an unprovoked attack. And what's interesting about this is exactly what happens with Feyre. But in a cruel twist of fate, even though she's literally like the perfect candidate to break the curse, Amarantha, she's not even able to like do anything about it because she doesn't know about the curse, and I guess she has to say I love you out loud, whatever. So Tamlin gets scared that Feyre's life is in danger because he actually starts to care about her. So he sends her back home with her family, but she decides she's gonna come back. So she comes back and finds out that Tamlin has been taken by Amarantha, and he is now being held captive as a slave under the mountain. And under the mountain is not a place that anybody in the fairy world wants to be, much less a human like Feyre, because as Alice, the servant of the Spring Court Castle, says, Feyre, your skin is paper thin. Like, she will crush you like a grape. Basically, like, you're human. Like, you have no power. What are you doing? But Feyre is determined to try to save her, what she feels like is her one true love, Tamlin. So she goes under the mountain, and she's like, I'm come to claim my love. And Amarantha basically laughs in her face. And she's described as like having this like crimson red hair, bright white teeth, but like a sneer, like a wicked smile. And then she even has like a crystal ring with an eyeball in it. So she's like, okay, we've painted the picture. She is like the perfect villain. She's a sadist, basically. And it's described under the mountain as like kind of looking like a cave, and it's dark, it's wet, it's cold, you know, like it's like a dungeon but in a cave. And she's like, okay, Feyre, like I'll let you save Tamlin, but you have to either complete 3 tasks without dying, and they're obviously really hard, or you have to solve this riddle. I was so mad that I didn't figure this riddle out, by the way. And let me know if you figured it out before it says what happened, because it seems so obvious to me now, but at the time the riddle was really hard, and I was like sitting there with Feyre trying to figure it out. Anyway, so Feyre meets this guy named Rhysand, and Rhysand seems really interesting, and I remember thinking like, is there something wrong with me? Because for some reason I like Rhysand better than Tamlin. And even though Tamlin is like obviously like in this book is like the love interest, you know, but there's definitely parts where it's like, I don't know, there's something about Rhysand. I can't wait to see more of him. Like, he's like, he reminds me of Cardan in the Cruel Prince series. He's got like the violet eyes and like the dark hair, and he's basically like a prince of darkness. He's from the Night Court, and he's got like bat-like wings, but he's he comes across snarky and sarcastic and rude, but you could tell there's something else there. So he's definitely a really interesting character to read about. And yeah, so Rhysand ends up making a deal with Feyre, and he helps her. Like, he makes it seem like he's doing it for himself, but really he's helping her. And Feyre ends up, she breaks the curse, but it comes at great cost, and she basically destroys herself in the process. So it's a happy ending, but it's also a sad ending, because it's like, she did it, she accomplished her mission, but it definitely leaves us on a cliffhanger, because it's like, what does she do with all that trauma? And she's going home with Tamlin, but when Tamlin was under the mountain, like, she saved him, he didn't save her. Like, if anything, he just sat there and watched. Like, and I would love to know, like, what you think about Tamlin and Rhysand, especially if you've only read the first book. Because to me, at first I was like, okay, Tamlin's kind of cool, I like Tamlin. But then when I saw the way he acted under the mountain, I'm like, dude, you're just gonna sit there and watch her get tortured? Like, what is wrong with you? And like, Rhysand is like all dark and twisty and everything, but like, at least he's there whenever she needs him, you know? So, I don't know, that's just me. But anyway, I'm Team Rhysand. Let me know what team you're on, Team Tamlin or Team Rhysand. I feel like it's not even a competition. But this first book, it is kind of hard to tell, because, you know, for most of the book, Tamlin seems like the good guy. But we'll see what happens, I guess. I don't know. So that's the end of the storyline. But now to get into the spoiler-filled review, I just want to say the world-building skills, absolutely amazing in this book. The romance, I feel like I can see some seeds being planted. Was it the best romance? Like, I mean, it was interesting. The thing is, the plot overrides the romance. Like, the romance is not the most interesting part in the book. There are some spicy scenes, but they're kind of vanilla for my taste. It's nothing freaky. It's nothing freaky, guys. Yeah, it's Tamlin just kind of sucks as a love interest. It feels a little intentionally written that way, though. It feels like there's going to be more to come in the second book, whether that's with Tamlin or Rhysand or somebody else. But yeah, he just seems very brutish and selfish and spoiled, honestly. And then at the end, like, it's like you don't know what to think, whether to feel bad for him or is he just an idiot? Because, like, why did he sit there and watch, you know, what's supposed to be the love of his life, like, destroy herself? And he didn't even try to help her? Like, I get that his powers were weakened, but, like, it even describes him in the book as, like, not even looking at her, which is just wild to me. So, let me know what you think about Tamlin. He didn't really have a lot of redeeming qualities to me. Feyre was very interesting. I love Feyre. Nesta, I have conflicted feelings about, because I feel like she is cruel, but also she does love her family. She's kind of cold and like hardened, and it comes from her mother. Her mother had that nature about her, but also it seems like Nesta is strong whenever other people aren't, and like at least she's present, you know, like whenever things were going south in Feyre's village, at least Nesta was mentally there, and it seemed like Elaine and the dad just checked out completely. So like Nesta, I think she's got her wits about her. She's just not the nicest person, and she's kind of spoiled, and Feyre's kind of spoiled her, but it's not really Feyre's fault. So yeah. And then Lucien, I really appreciated Lucien and Feyre's friendship. Not as much like under the mountain, but at least he was trying to help her. So that part was interesting to me. And Amarantha made a really good villain. I really like her as a villain. I think that she's very interesting to read about. I think it's interesting that at the beginning of the book, it kind of is more like romantic, like Beauty and the Beast and fantasy, and then at the end it gets very dark and twisted. Honestly, that's like my favorite part about the book is the end whenever it gets very dark twisted. So let me know what you think about the book in the comments below, but I highly recommend it. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.